The chamber stretched wide enough to hold a small city. 47 species had sent their representatives, each one draped in the finest their worlds could offer. Crystalline beings reflected light across metal walls. Insectoid diplomats clicked their mandibles in quiet conversation. Massive creatures from high-gravity worlds sat on reinforced platforms that groaned under their weight. David Reed sat alone in the human section wearing a plain gray suit. No ceremonial armor. No genetic enhancements visible through his skin. No technological implants glowing at his temples. Just a man with a notebook made of actual paper, which several nearby aliens had been staring at for the past 20 minutes like it might explode. High Chancellor Brenval rose from the central dais. His species stood 3 meters tall, covered in smooth blue scales that marked him as royalty among the Thoric Dominion. When he spoke, translation devices rendered his words in 47 languages simultaneously. This emergency session addresses the human problem. Brenval gestured toward David with one clawed hand. Earth has expanded into 3 star systems without council approval. They refused to submit military specifications for review. They declined mandatory population registration. These violations cannot stand. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. A reptilian delegate from the outer reach hissed her support. Humans are unpredictable. They follow no proper protocols. They build weapons we cannot classify, added a floating gas creature whose voice echoed from a mechanical speaker. How can we trust a species that hides its capabilities? David wrote something in his notebook. The scratching of his pen on paper seemed loud in the vast chamber. Ambassador Reed. Brenval's voice carried an edge. You have heard the charges. What does Earth say in its defense? David looked up, met the High Chancellor's eyes, and said nothing. Very well. Brenval straightened. The Galactic Council will now vote on a formal declaration of war against the human species. All in favor. 41 hands, claws, tentacles, and appendages rose into the air. Those opposed. 6 members abstained, mostly younger species who had joined the Council within the last century. The rest remained silent. The measure passes. As of this moment, the Galactic Council is at war with Earth. Brenval seemed satisfied. Ambassador Reed, you will surrender Earth's defensive coordinates and stand down all military forces. You have 72 hours to comply before we begin orbital operations. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate turned to watch the human reaction. They expected panic, perhaps desperate pleading, maybe even tears. This was how younger species responded when faced with the combined might of the galaxy's greatest powers. David Reed smiled. It was not a large smile, not mocking or cruel, just a small, genuine smile that touched the corners of his mouth. He closed his notebook, set down his pen, and stood slowly. I have a question before we proceed, David said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. This declaration of war means all previous diplomatic protections are void, correct? The treaties and conventions we agreed to when Earth joined the Council no longer apply. Brenval frowned. That is correct. You are now an enemy state. And the non-interference clauses? The information sharing restrictions? The diplomatic immunity protocols? David's tone remained pleasant, as if discussing weather rather than warfare. All void, Brenval confirmed. Why do you ask? David picked up his notebook and tucked it into his jacket pocket. I wanted to make sure I understood the situation completely. Before we proceed, I need to request a 48-hour recess to consult with my government and prepare Earth's formal response. Several delegates laughed. The reptilian from the outer reach spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. He wants time to arrange his surrender properly. How civilized. Brenval waved one hand dismissively. Very well. 48 hours. Return with Earth's surrender, and we may show mercy to your species. He clearly believed he was being generous. David nodded politely and walked toward the chamber exit. His footsteps echoed on the polished floor. Every eye followed him as he passed beneath the great archway that led to the diplomatic quarters. Just before he left the room, David paused and spoke quietly to his personal AI assistant. The device was small, clipped to his collar, but in the silent chamber his words carried. Send a message to the research team. Tell them to compile the full list. Every interaction, every document, every recording from the past 30 years. I want it all organized and ready for review when I return to the ship. The AI chirped acknowledgement that a junior delegate from the Kelson Collective, a species that had only joined the council 5 years ago, leaned toward her neighbor. What list? But David had already left the chamber, and the council delegates began congratulating themselves on their decisive action. They discussed invasion timelines and planetary occupation strategies. Some argued over which human worlds would be assigned to which council species after the conquest. None of them noticed that the 6 delegates who had abstained from the war vote quietly left the chamber and headed toward the communication centers. They had all worked with humans before. They had all seen that same calm, measured approach to problems, and they all wanted to send warnings to their home worlds before whatever was about to happen actually happened. Back on his ship, David sat in his quarters surrounded by holographic displays. His team of analysts worked at nearby stations, pulling files from secure databases. 30 years of diplomatic records began appearing in organized columns. David opened his notebook again and wrote 3 words at the top of a blank page. Choose the target. Then he drew a single line underneath and smiled that same small smile. Screens filled every wall of the analysis room. David's team had worked through the night, and empty coffee containers littered their workstations. Most humans looked exhausted. David looked energized. Pull up the Thoric trade records from year 7, he said, pointing at the leftmost display. Cross-reference with the Outer Reach Civil War timeline. His lead analyst, a woman named Patricia Wong, typed rapidly. Got it. The weapons shipments started 3 months before the conflict went public. They knew it was coming. David leaned closer to examine the data streams. They armed both sides. Show me the financial trail. Numbers cascaded across the screen. Shell companies, intermediary accounts, and dummy corporations created a web of transactions that would have confused most investigators. But Patricia had spent 15 years following money trails for Earth's intelligence services before joining the diplomatic corps. Payment originated from Thoric military accounts, routed through 7 different systems, and delivered to manufacturers in neutral space. Both rebel and government forces received identical shipment manifests within a week of each other. David made a note. That's target 1. What else do we have? A younger analyst named Robert spoke up from across the room. The slavery documentation is solid. We have surveillance footage from 4 stations, all operating under the cover of medical research facilities. Which species are involved? 2 council members for certain, possibly 4 if we can verify the financial connections. Robert highlighted several files. The victims are primarily from non-council worlds, species too small to defend themselves. David felt his jaw tighten. His sister had worked on a mining station 15 years ago, back when Earth first made contact with the Galactic community. Faulty equipment caused an explosion that killed 37 people. The Council had denied Earth's request to upgrade the safety systems, claiming human technology did not meet galactic standards. His sister suffocated when her emergency shelter failed, that he never forgot that the Council valued their regulations more than human lives. But he learned to channel anger into patience. Make sure we have multiple sources for everything, David said. They will claim the footage is fabricated. We need corroborating evidence they cannot dismiss. Patricia pulled up another file. The embezzlement case against Finance Director Kortma is airtight. He has been stealing from the Mutual Defense Fund for 12 years. We have transaction records, property deeds for 3 private estates, and communication logs where he discusses hiding the money. How much did he take? Approximately 900 billion credits. Someone whistled softly. That was enough money to fund a small nation for decades. David walked to the center of the room where a holographic display showed the Galactic Council's organizational structure. 47 member species, arranged in tiers based on military power and economic influence. Newer members like Earth occupied the bottom tiers with limited voting rights and heavy restrictions. They built a system that keeps them on top, David said quietly. Species that join later never get the same advantages. They enforce laws on us that they ignore for themselves. Robert nodded. The database has 600 documented violations of council law by current members. Trade restrictions they bypass, territorial claims they ignore, and technology bans they violate whenever convenient. But enforcement only applies to species like us. Because we do not have the power to fight back, Patricia added. Until now. David turned to face his team. We are not fighting. Not the way they expect. Pull every piece of evidence we have on council corruption, hypocrisy, and criminal activity. I want it organized by severity and impact. The worst offenses at the top. What are we doing with it? Robert asked. We are going to make a choice, David said. The council declared war expecting us to respond with weapons and military force. They think war means ships and soldiers. We are going to show them what happens when you start a war with people who study history. Patricia understood first. Her eyes widened. You are going to release everything. Not just release it. We are going to make it impossible to ignore. Every news network, every public forum, every independent species that has ever felt oppressed by council authority. They will all receive complete documentation of every crime, every lie, every broken promise. David pulled up a star map showing the thousands of systems throughout the galaxy. The council's power is built on their reputation. They claim moral authority. They say they represent order and justice. We are going to prove they represent corruption and hypocrisy. They will try to stop the transmission, Robert warned. Which is why we are not transmitting from here. David highlighted several dozen locations on the map. Earth has diplomatic offices in 40 systems. Every single one has received encrypted copies of our database. When I give the signal, they will all release simultaneously. The council cannot stop 40 transmissions at once. The room fell silent as his team absorbed the implications. This is going to shatter the council, Patricia said softly. The council shattered itself when it built a system based on lies. David closed the star map. We are just showing the galaxy what was always there. He spent the next 6 hours reviewing every document personally. His team tried to convince him to rest, but David refused. This was too important to trust to others. Every piece of evidence needed verification. Every source needed confirmation. Around hour 9, Patricia brought him actual food instead of another coffee. You should sleep, she said. After. David took the sandwich without looking away from his screens. Your sister would want you to rest. That made him pause. He looked at Patricia, who had known him long enough to speak plainly. My sister would want me to make sure no one else dies because the council values power over lives. He took a bite of the sandwich. We get one chance at this. If we miss something, if they find a way to discredit our evidence, then we lose. Earth loses, and every species trapped under council authority continues suffering. Patricia sat down beside him. We have enough. What we have already documented could bring down a dozen governments. Then we make sure we have enough for all 47. She smiled despite her exhaustion. You are possibly the most stubborn human I have ever met. I had good teachers. David pulled up the final category of evidence. Show me the suppression files. These were perhaps the worst crimes. Records showing how council species deliberately prevented smaller civilizations from developing technology that might make them competitive. Trade embargoes disguised as safety concerns. Research bans justified by false environmental claims. Economic sanctions that kept entire worlds in perpetual poverty. They built a system designed to keep themselves powerful and everyone else weak, David muttered. And we are about to tear it down, Patricia confirmed. David sent an encrypted message to Earth's government. It was short, just 3 sentences. Evidence compiled and verified. Ready to proceed with information release. Requesting authorization for Operation Sunlight. The response arrived within an hour. Earth's leadership had reviewed his plan 3 days ago, before the council even called the war vote. They knew this was coming. Authorization granted. Make them understand why humans remember history. David stood and addressed his team. Package everything. 40 identical databases, ready for simultaneous transmission. We go public in 26 hours. As his analysts scrambled to finalize their work, David returned to his quarters. He sat alone in the dim light, holding a photograph of his sister. She was smiling in the picture, wearing her mining gear, proud of her work. They are about to learn, he told the photograph quietly, that you do not start wars with people who refuse to forget. David walked into the council chamber carrying 6 physical containers and a single data chip. The containers were old-fashioned storage cases, the kind used on Earth before digital systems became universal. Several aliens stared at them with confusion. High Chancellor Brenval sat on his elevated platform looking pleased with himself. The past 48 hours had clearly been spent planning Earth's occupation. Representatives from the major military powers were present, likely discussing which human colonies they would claim. Ambassador Reed. Brenval's voice carried across the chamber. Have you brought Earth's surrender? No. David set the containers down carefully on the presentation table. I brought something better. Nervous laughter rippled through the assembled delegates. A few exchanged glances that suggested they thought David might have lost his mind. Then you condemn your species to destruction, Brenval said flatly. Our combined fleets are already moving into position. Earth's defenses cannot possibly withstand 47 unified militaries. You are absolutely right, David agreed. Which is why Earth has no intention of fighting a military war. He opened the first container and pulled out a thick stack of documents. Before we discuss invasions and orbital bombardments, I thought the Council should know what information Earth plans to release to every independent species, news network, and public forum in the galaxy. We have about 30 minutes before the transmission goes out, so I will summarize the highlights. Brenval frowned. What transmission? David held up the first document. This is a complete financial record of the Thoric Dominion's weapon sales to both sides of the Outer Reach Civil War. You armed the rebels and the government simultaneously, prolonging a conflict that killed 6 million people. Weapons sales are illegal under Council law, particularly to active war zones. The chamber erupted. The reptilian delegate from the Outer Reach stood abruptly, her scales flushing dark red. You sold weapons to the terrorists who killed my people? Brenval raised one hand. Those documents are clearly fabricated. Human desperation has led to obvious lies. Are they? David pulled out another document. Here are communication records between your military procurement office and the shell companies used to hide the transactions. Your defense minister discusses delivery schedules. And here is video footage of Thoric military ships offloading weapons at the rebel base on Kresh 7. He activated a holographic display. The video showed exactly what he described, complete with identification codes on the Thoric vessels. This is doctored, Brenval insisted, but his voice had lost some confidence. We have 17 separate recordings from different sources. Unless you believe humans somehow fabricated surveillance from 3 different species monitoring systems, the evidence is authentic. David set those documents aside and opened the second container. Moving on. These files document 4 medical research stations operating in neutral space. They are actually processing centers for slave labor. The word slavery silenced the chamber instantly. The Council had outlawed the practice 2 centuries ago after a brutal war. It was considered the greatest moral crime in galactic society. Impossible, the floating gas creature said. Slavery has been eliminated. David pulled out photographs. They showed beings in cages, marked with identification numbers, being sorted by physical capability. These images were taken 6 months ago at a station registered to a corporation owned by Council member Feldan. The victims are primarily from non-Council worlds. Species too small to file formal complaints. He showed more images. Medical experiments. Forced labor. Children separated from parents. A delegate from one of the smaller Council members stood. If this is true, those responsible must face trial immediately. Oh, it gets worse, David said calmly. He opened the third container. Finance Director Kortma has embezzled 900 billion credits from the Mutual Defense Fund over 12 years. He used the money to build 3 private estates, invest in luxury goods, and bribe 17 different officials to hide the theft. Here are the transaction records, property deeds, and communication logs discussing the cover-up. Kortma, a slug-like creature seated in a specialized mobility tank, began sliding rapidly toward the exit. 2 guards moved to block him. The defense fund was supposed to protect all council members. A smaller species representative said, "Our worlds paid into that fund. You stole from us?" David did not wait for Kortma's response. He pulled out document after document, revelation after revelation. Council species bypassing their own trade laws. Technology development deliberately suppressed in smaller civilizations. Economic sanctions used as weapons against species that refused to submit to exploitation. Treaties violated hundreds of times by council members while younger species faced punishment for minor infractions. With each revelation, the council chamber descended further into chaos. Delegates shouted at each other. Ancient alliances cracked in real time. Species that had worked together for centuries now hurled accusations across the room. Enough! Brenval's voice boomed through the chamber. Even if these accusations have merit, they are internal council matters. They do not excuse Earth's violations. David smiled that same small smile from 2 days ago. That is an excellent point, High Chancellor. Let me ask you something. What exactly did Earth do that violates council law? You expanded into unauthorized systems. Like the Thoric Dominion expanded into the Kepler Belt 7 years ago without council approval? That expansion, documented here, which the council ignored. Brenval's scales flushed darker. You refused to submit military specifications, like 18 other council members who have classified weapons programs, all documented in our files? Or did you think Earth was not paying attention to the double standard? You declined population registration, a requirement added 4 years ago that applies only to species who joined after year 40 of the current charter. A rule specifically designed to burden newer members while exempting older ones. Also clearly documented in our analysis of council legislative patterns. David walked to the center of the chamber, addressing everyone present. Earth committed no crimes. We violated protocols designed specifically to keep us weak and subordinate. When we refused to accept second-class status, you declared war. So we made a choice. He held up the data chip. This chip contains everything. Every crime, every lie, every abuse of power committed by council members over the past 30 years. In 21 minutes, 40 separate transmission points throughout the galaxy will broadcast this information simultaneously. You cannot stop all of them. You cannot suppress the truth once it reaches independent news networks and public forums. You are destroying the council, someone said. The council destroyed itself by building a system based on corruption and inequality. We are simply showing the galaxy what you really are. David placed the chip on the central podium. Earth's target was never your fleets or your worlds. Our target was your credibility, your moral authority, your ability to claim you represent justice and order. Consider that target destroyed. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and the war declaration? You might want to reconsider that. Several independent species have already contacted Earth about forming a defensive alliance. Turns out they are tired of council oppression too. You can try to invade Earth, but you will be doing it without unified support and with your crimes exposed for everyone to see. David walked out of the chamber. Behind him, the Galactic Council tore itself apart. David's ship hung in neutral space, surrounded by 19 council security vessels. They had been there for 40 minutes, blocking any movement while council leadership decided what to do. Communication requests flooded his systems every few seconds. Patricia appeared on his personal screen looking worried. They are demanding we surrender the transmission codes and stop the data release. Tell them the transmission already happened 18 minutes ago. David watched another security ship take position off his port side. It is spreading through 847 separate networks as we speak. No one can stop it now. She nodded and closed the channel. David turned his attention to the news feeds coming in from across the galaxy. The Council controlled major media outlets, but independent networks existed in thousands of systems. Earth's diplomatic teams had spent years building relationships with journalists who wanted to report truth rather than propaganda. Now those relationships paid off. The largest independent network, based in the Free Worlds Coalition, broke the story first. Their lead reporter was a crystalline being named Shard who had built a reputation for exposing corruption. She spoke directly to camera while holographic displays showed the evidence behind her. Documents released today by Earth's diplomatic service reveal systematic corruption at the highest levels of Galactic Council authority. We have confirmed the authenticity of these records through 3 independent verification sources. What they show is disturbing. The broadcast cut to footage of Thorik military vessels delivering weapons to rebel forces. Then images from the slave processing stations. Financial records of Courtma's embezzlement. Treaty violations by 24 Council species. David switched to another feed. A news network from the Outer Reach was interviewing survivors of their civil war. One woman held up a piece of shrapnel from a bomb that killed her family. "This has Thorik manufacturing codes," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "They armed the people who murdered my children. While claiming to support peace, they profited from our deaths." Another channel showed protests erupting on a Thorik colony world. Citizens demanded answers from their government. Some called for the High Chancellor's resignation. Others wanted criminal charges filed. David's communication system chimed. Incoming priority message from the Council Security Commander. "Ambassador Reed, you are ordered to stand down and prepare for boarding. You are under arrest for espionage and crimes against galactic peace." David activated his response channel. "On what authority? The Council declared war on Earth 2 days ago. We are enemy states. You cannot arrest enemy combatants for conducting warfare." A long pause followed. The security commander was likely consulting with superiors who had just realized their legal position was complicated. "This was not an act of war," the commander finally said. "This was information terrorism." Interesting perspective. I call it transparency. David pulled up another news feed showing mass demonstrations on 4 different worlds. "You should check the public response. People seem to appreciate learning the truth." He closed the channel and switched to his analysis team's frequency. Robert appeared on screen with data scrolling behind him. "The information spread to 96 systems in the first hour," Robert reported. "Council authorities tried blocking transmissions in 12 locations, but the attempts failed. Too many independent networks picked up the story too quickly." "What is the public reaction?" "Mixed in Council space, overwhelmingly supportive in independent systems. 3 Council species are experiencing significant internal unrest. The Thorik Dominion has riots in 6 major cities. 2 minor Council members officially withdrew from the war declaration against Earth." David allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. "And the slave stations?" "Local authorities raided all 4 within 3 hours of our release. They found exactly what our documentation described. Over 2,000 victims have been freed so far. Images of the raids are being broadcast everywhere." That was the part David cared about most. The strategic victory mattered, but actual people being freed from slavery made this more than just political maneuvering. Another communication request came through, this one marked urgent from Ambassador Lyra of the Kelson Collective. David accepted it. Lyra appeared on screen looking exhausted. Her species had only joined the Council 5 years ago, around the same time as Earth. She was young for a diplomat, barely into her 3rd decade. "Ambassador Reed, I need to speak with you privately." "Go ahead. Not on this channel. The Council is monitoring everything. Can your ship break through their blockade?" David glanced at his navigation display. "Probably, but they would fire on us. I would rather avoid casualties if possible." "Then I am coming to you. Give me 20 minutes. She closed the channel before he could respond. True to her word, Lyra's small diplomatic shuttle requested docking clearance 19 minutes later. The Council security ships did not interfere, likely because stopping a Council member from moving freely would create additional problems they did not need. David met her in the docking bay. She was smaller than most diplomats, barely reaching his shoulder, with bronze-colored skin and large eyes adapted for her world's dim light. "Thank you for seeing me," she said quietly. "What you did in the council chamber was extraordinary. Also completely insane." "Probably both," David agreed. He led her to a small conference room away from the main ship areas. "What did you need to discuss?" Lyra activated a privacy shield that would prevent electronic surveillance. "For more council species are planning to withdraw from the war declaration. They are afraid of internal rebellions if they continue supporting the council's actions. 2 others are demanding an emergency session to address the corruption revelations. That is good news for Earth. It is also tearing the council apart." She sat down heavily. "My government sent me to ask what Earth wants. Not publicly. They cannot be seen negotiating with you right now. But they want to know your actual goals." David considered his response carefully. "Earth wants a fair system, one where all species have equal rights regardless of when they joined or how powerful their militaries are. We want laws that apply to everyone, not just convenient targets. We want the corruption prosecuted and the victims compensated. You want to destroy the council. We want to fix it. There is a difference." Lyra studied him for a long moment. "Most species in your position would demand revenge. They would want trials and executions and public humiliation of their enemies. Revenge accomplishes nothing," David said. "My sister died because the council valued regulations over lives. Destroying them would not bring her back. But building a better system might prevent other people from losing their families the same way. Your sister." He told her about the mining accident, about Earth's requests for better safety equipment being denied, about watching the council prioritize their control over human survival. "I am sorry," Lyra said softly, "for what small comfort it provides. Know that many smaller council species have similar stories. The system has always been designed to benefit the powerful, which is why it needs to change. The powerful will not give up their advantages willingly." David pulled up a holographic display showing the protests and unrest spreading across council space. "They do not have a choice anymore. Their own citizens are demanding reform. Independent species are forming defensive alliances outside council authority. The old system is collapsing whether they like it or not. The only question is what replaces it. And you think Earth should help build that replacement? I think every species should help build it, including the Kelson Collective." David met her eyes. "Your people joined the council hoping for protection and partnership. Instead you found exploitation and second-class status. Would you prefer to keep that system or help create something better?" Lyra was quiet for a long time. Finally she stood. "I need to return before my absence causes suspicion, but I will relay your message to my government. I suspect they will be very interested in Earth's vision for the future." She paused at the door. "Ambassador Reed, you terrified 47 species today. I hope you understand the magnitude of what you started." "I do," David said. "And I hope you understand that sometimes terror is necessary to force change." After she left, David returned to watching the news feeds. The galaxy was transforming before his eyes, and Earth had lit the match that started the fire. The meeting room was smaller than David expected. No grand chambers or ceremonial platforms. Just a simple conference space on a neutral station with basic furniture and standard lighting. High Chancellor Brenval sat at one end of the table looking diminished without his elevated throne. 6 other council leaders occupied the remaining seats, all species that controlled major military or economic power. They had requested this meeting 12 hours ago through back channels. Not an official negotiation, they insisted. Just a private discussion about resolving the current crisis. David sat alone on his side of the table. No aides, no guards, no recording devices that he brought anyway. The council likely had surveillance throughout the room, but he did not care. What he planned to say could be public. "Ambassador Reed." Brenval began, his voice lacking its usual authority. "The situation has become complicated. You mean your citizens are rioting and your allies are abandoning you?" David said plainly. Yes, I noticed. A centipede-like being named Veldar clicked her mandibles in what David had learned was frustration. You have created chaos throughout council space. Governments are falling. Trade has been disrupted. Some systems are calling for complete dissolution of the council. I did not create anything, David replied. I revealed what already existed. Your corruption, your hypocrisy, your systematic exploitation of weaker species. The chaos is your fault, not mine. Regardless of blame, we must find a solution. This came from Orin, a mammalian species with thick gray fur and calm demeanor. He was considered the most diplomatic of the council leadership. Earth cannot want the complete collapse of galactic governance. Why not? David leaned back in his chair. You declared war on us. Why should we care if your governments fall? Because the alternative is worse, Orin said. Without the council, there will be regional conflicts, trade wars, and territorial disputes with no mechanism for resolution. Millions will die. David had expected this argument. He pulled out his notebook, that same paper journal that fascinated aliens, and flipped to a marked page. On Earth, we had an empire called Rome. It lasted centuries, built on military conquest and exploitation. When it finally collapsed, people predicted chaos and death. And yes, there was conflict during the transition. But eventually, better systems emerged. Systems based on consent rather than force. Your history is not universal law, Brenval said. No, but it teaches useful lessons. David closed the notebook. The council is Rome. You built power on subjugation and maintained it through fear. Now your subjects have learned the truth, and your empire is crumbling. You can either fight to preserve a broken system, or you can help build something better. What does Earth want? Veldar asked directly. David had prepared for this moment. He pulled out a data tablet and slid it across the table. These are our terms. Non-negotiable. Orin picked up the tablet and began reading. His expression shifted from curious to shocked to something approaching horror. He passed it to Brenval, who read it and slammed one clawed hand on the table. This is absurd. You are demanding complete dissolution of the council structure. Correct, David confirmed. The current system is designed to maintain inequality. No amount of reform will fix fundamental corruption in the foundation. We need to start fresh. And replace it with what? Veldar demanded. A galactic assembly where every species has equal voting rights regardless of military power or how long they have been members. Independent oversight of all trade and diplomatic agreements. Universal enforcement of laws without favoritism. Public trials for those involved in slavery, embezzlement, and other crimes we documented. Compensation funds for victims of council exploitation. The room fell silent as council leaders processed what David was proposing. Finally, Brenval spoke, his voice low and dangerous. You are asking us to surrender our authority. I am asking you to surrender your tyranny, David corrected. Your authority was built on lies. You can keep pretending you represent justice, but the galaxy knows the truth now. You are just another group of powerful species that exploited everyone weaker than you. If we agree to this, the Thoric Dominion loses centuries of diplomatic precedent, Brenval said. Our influence would be reduced to equal footing with species that joined last year. Yes, that is unacceptable. David stood. Then we are done here. Earth will proceed with forming our own alliance of independent species. We already have 17 interested parties. When your government collapses under the weight of your citizens' anger, we will negotiate with whoever replaces you. Wait, Orin raised one hand. Sit down, Ambassador. Let us discuss this rationally. David remained standing. There is nothing to discuss. You built a system designed to keep you powerful and everyone else subordinate. Earth refuses to participate in that system. We either build something fair or we build something separate. Your choice. Veldar clicked her mandibles rapidly, a sign of deep thought in her species. You understand this will end council dominance permanently. Species like humans and Kelsons would have the same voice as the Thoric Dominion. That is the entire point, David said. Democracy means equality. If you are not willing to accept equality, then you never believed in justice to begin with. Another council leader, a gaseous being named Helt, spoke through his mechanical translator. Some of our members will fight this. They will see it as humiliation. Then they can fight, David said simply. But they will be fighting their own citizens, not Earth. We have already won. Your credibility is destroyed. Your moral authority is gone. All that remains is whether you collapse violently or transition peacefully. Oren studied David carefully. You are very confident for someone whose species is massively outnumbered and outgunned. Because we understand something you do not. David sat back down. Power is not about weapons or ships. Power is about legitimacy. The moment your citizens stopped believing in your right to rule, you lost. Everything since then has been just managing the transition. You studied Earth history, Oren said. You know empires can fight for decades before finally falling. We also know that fighting delays the inevitable and multiplies the suffering. David leaned forward. I am offering you a chance to be remembered as leaders who chose reform over destruction, who admitted their mistakes and helped build something better. That is more than most fallen empires get. Brenval looked at the other council leaders. David could see them calculating, considering their options. They had power, but that power was fragmenting. They had military might, but their soldiers were questioning orders. They had authority, but their citizens were demanding change. Finally, Veldar spoke. We need time to consult with our governments. This decision is too large for 7 individuals. You have 72 hours, David said. After that, Earth begins formal alliance negotiations with independent species. The new power structure will form with or without council participation. And if we refuse your terms entirely, Brenval asked. David met his eyes without blinking. Then you fight a civil war with your own people while Earth builds a better future without you. History will remember the Galactic Council as just another failed empire that chose pride over progress. He stood again, preparing to leave. As he reached the door, Oren called out, Ambassador Reed, why did Earth not release this evidence before the war declaration? You could have exposed us without forcing a confrontation. David turned back. Because you would not have listened. Powerful species never hear criticism until they feel vulnerable. You had to declare war on us, had to feel confident in your superiority, before you were emotionally capable of recognizing your failures. That is remarkably cynical, Oren said. That is remarkably human, David replied. We have thousands of years of experience watching empires fall. We know the patterns. He left them sitting in that small conference room, 7 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, suddenly unsure if they had any power left at all. 3 weeks changed everything. The council chamber looked nothing like it had during that first war declaration. Someone had removed the tiered seating that displayed hierarchy so obviously. Now circular arrangements filled the space, species sitting at equal heights with equal access to speaking platforms. 103 representatives gathered here today, including dozens who had never been allowed council participation before. David sat in Earth's section watching delegates file in. Patricia sat beside him reviewing final documents on her tablet. The Thorik delegation just arrived, she said quietly. Brenval is not with them. They sent his replacement. I heard he resigned last week. David watched the new Thorik representative, a younger female with lighter scales, take her seat without the ceremonial pride that had marked her predecessor. Their citizens demanded accountability. 8 former council leaders are facing criminal trials now, Patricia noted, including Courtma for the embezzlement. He tried to flee to the outer rim, but bounty hunters caught him 4 days ago. David felt satisfaction at that news. Courtma had stolen money meant to protect smaller species. His capture meant something. The slave processing stations had been completely shut down. 2,400 victims had been freed, with more discovered as investigations continued. Rehabilitation centers were being established on 6 worlds to help survivors recover. Earth had contributed significant medical resources to the effort, Ambassador Lyra of the Kelson Collective approached David's section. She looked tired but determined. Ambassador Reed, I wanted to thank you before the session begins. For what? For giving smaller species a voice. My government was prepared to spend decades as subordinate members under the old system. Now we are voting on equal terms with the Thoric Dominion. She smiled. It feels strange but good. Your people earned that equality, David said. We just made it impossible to deny anymore. The session began with a formal withdrawal of the war declaration against Earth. 41 species voted to rescind it, with only 3 abstaining. Those 3 were former council powers still bitter about their reduced influence, but they lacked the support to maintain hostilities. The vote on the new Galactic Assembly Charter came next. David watched representatives debate the specific language, proposing amendments and clarifications. Some arguments got heated, but that was normal in any democratic process. The important part was that every voice carried equal weight now. The charter passed with 97 votes in favor, 4 against, and 2 abstentions. A mammalian delegate named Rena, whose species had been exploited by the old council system, stood to speak. This is not perfect. We still have species who resist change. We still have economic disparities and political tensions. But for the first time, we have a system that allows us to address these problems as equals rather than subjects. Applause spread through the chamber. Not universal, but widespread enough to matter. David felt Patricia nudge his arm. They are calling for Earth's representative to speak. He had not prepared remarks. David preferred responding to situations rather than scripting everything in advance. He walked to the central platform and looked around at the assembled species. 3 weeks ago, the Galactic Council declared war on Earth. They expected us to fight with weapons and military force. We chose a different weapon. Truth. David paused, letting that word hang in the air. We documented decades of corruption, hypocrisy, and exploitation. We showed the galaxy what the old system really was. Not because we wanted revenge, but because we wanted change. A few delegates nodded. Others watched with cautious expressions. Earth did not ask to lead this reformation. We did not demand special status or extra privileges. We simply insisted on equality. Every species in this chamber now has that equality, regardless of military power or economic influence. What you do with that equality is up to you. David looked toward the Thoric delegation. Some species have lost advantages they held for centuries. That is difficult, and I understand the resentment. But maintaining those advantages required oppressing others. You have to decide if your pride is worth perpetual injustice. He shifted his attention to the smaller species who had joined recently. Others have gained voices they were denied. That is powerful, but it comes with responsibility. Equal rights mean equal obligations. You now help govern the galaxy, which means you share the burden of making difficult decisions. Patricia had once asked him what he would say if given a chance to address the entire galaxy. Now he had that chance. Humans study history obsessively. We analyze every empire that rose and fell on our world. We know the patterns. The Egyptians, the Romans, the Mongols, the British. Every single one believed their dominance would last forever. Every single one fell when they stopped serving the people and started serving themselves. David gestured around the chamber. The old council followed that pattern. This new assembly has a chance to break it. How do we break it? Someone called out. By remembering that power is not a prize to win. Power is a responsibility to share. The moment any government starts serving itself instead of its citizens, it begins dying. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but always inevitably. David smiled slightly. Earth does not want to rule the galaxy. We want to participate in a galaxy worth living in. That requires all of us committing to fairness over dominance. He returned to his seat as the session continued. More votes followed, establishing independent oversight committees, transparency requirements, and enforcement mechanisms designed to prevent the old corruption from returning. None of it was perfect, but perfection was not the goal. Improvement was the goal. After the session, David found himself surrounded by representatives wanting to speak with him. Some offered thanks. Others wanted to discuss trade agreements under the new system. A few expressed concerns about specific implementation details. Ambassador Lyra appeared through the crowd and gently redirected the attention. Ambassador Reed needs rest. You can schedule formal meetings through proper channels. She guided him to a quieter area of the station. They stood at an observation window overlooking the space outside. Ships from dozens of species moved through nearby traffic lanes, no longer following the old hierarchies that dictated who had priority. "You are returning to Earth?" Lyra asked. "Tomorrow. My government wants a full report, and I have not seen my family in 6 months. Will you come back?" David shook his head. "Earth is sending a new ambassador. Someone younger who can help build the system rather than just tear down the old one. My skills are better suited to breaking things than creating them." "You underestimate yourself," Lyra said. "What you did required vision, not just destruction." "Maybe, but I am tired, and Earth needs representatives who are not carrying my particular anger." He looked at her. "You should consider running for First Secretary of the Assembly. The position needs someone who understands both the old system's failures and the new system's potential." "I am too young." "You are exactly the right age. The older delegates are too attached to their former power. You have perspective without baggage." David turned from the window. "Think about it." He left her there and returned to his ship. Patricia was already packing their equipment and organizing files for the transition to Earth's new diplomatic team. "Heard you turned down the first secretary position," she said without looking up. "You heard that fast. For people sent me messages asking if you lost your mind." She smiled. "I told them you were being sensible for once." David sat at his desk and pulled out his paper notebook. He flipped through pages of notes documenting the past 3 weeks. Evidence lists, voting tallies, negotiation points, personal observations about various species' reactions to change. On the last page, he found the photograph of his sister he had tucked there weeks ago. She was still smiling in the picture, still proud of her work, still gone because the old council valued control over lives. "We did it," he told the photograph quietly. "We built something better. Not perfect, but better." Patricia appeared in the doorway. "Earth is signaling. They want to know our departure timeline. Tell them we leave in 6 hours. I need a little more time here." After she left, David walked to his ship's observation deck. He watched the station where the new Galactic Assembly was forming, where species that had been enemies 3 weeks ago were now negotiating as equals, where a system built on exploitation was being replaced with one built on fairness. It would not last forever. Nothing lasted forever. But if they built it correctly, it might last long enough to matter. David's personal communicator chimed. "A message from Ambassador Lyra. I am considering your suggestion about First Secretary. If I run, will Earth support my candidacy?" He smiled and typed his response. "Absolutely. Good leaders should not have to ask permission to lead." 3 days later, Lyra announced her candidacy. 2 months after that, she won the election with strong support from younger species and progressive delegations. 5 months after the war declaration that never became a war, David stood in his sister's memorial garden on Earth. Someone had planted new flowers since his last visit. The plaque with her name reflected afternoon sunlight. "They will remember this differently than what actually happened," he told the memorial. "They will say Earth conquered through information warfare. They will claim we destroyed the Council. But you know the truth. We just refused to accept injustice quietly." He placed fresh flowers by the plaque and walked away. The galaxy was changing, slowly and imperfectly, but genuinely. That was enough. Somewhere above Earth, the new Galactic Assembly was holding its 3rd session. 103 species debating, compromising, and building something that might actually work. And for the first time in galactic history, they were doing it as equals. The holographic display flickered with red markers where Dalthene warships had died. High Admiral Garvin watched the numbers climb higher with each refresh. 47 destroyers gone. 32 cruisers crippled beyond repair. Over 200,000 souls lost to the void. The Grand War Council chamber buzzed with celebration anyway. A glorious victory. War Minister Draxus slammed his fist on the obsidian table. The humans threw everything at Tarsus. 9, and we crushed them. Empress Valina nodded from her throne, her scales gleaming under the chamber lights. How many human ships did we destroy? All 12 of them, Your Majesty. Draxus grinned. Complete annihilation. Garvin felt his stomach tighten. 12 ships. They had needed 47 warships to stop 12 human vessels. The math made his head hurt. High Admiral, you seem troubled by our victory. The Empress fixed her golden eyes on him. Explain yourself. Garvin pulled up the tactical data. Your Majesty, the engagement lasted 6 hours. Each human ship fought until it was literally torn apart. They never retreated, never surrendered. Our forces surrounded them 3-1 and still lost ships in every exchange. They fought well for primitives, Draxus said. What of it? Dead is dead. These were not military vessels. Intelligence Officer Mirith stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. She projected new images above the table. We recovered wreckage and analyzed their hull configurations. These ships were converted freighters. Civilian transports modified with weapons. The celebration died down slightly. Mirith continued. We also intercepted their communications before they were destroyed. The ship designations were things like Independent Hauler Perseus and Merchant Guild Defender. Their crew manifests listed occupations as cargo handlers, mining equipment operators, and transport pilots. Civilians? Valina leaned forward. The humans sent civilians against us? Volunteers, according to their transmissions. Mirith pulled up translated text. They kept referring to themselves as the Merchant Marine Volunteer Corps. Several messages mentioned they were buying time. Time for what? Garvin asked, though he feared he knew the answer. That's unclear. But they repeatedly referenced something they called the real Navy. One transmission said, and I quote, "Just hold them off until the real Navy shows up." Silence fell over the council chamber. Draxus recovered first. Propaganda. They were trying to make us afraid of reinforcements that don't exist. The humans are a young species. They probably threw every combat-capable ship they had at us in desperation. Perhaps. Garvin studied the battle recordings again. But civilian volunteers don't usually fight with this level of coordination. Look at their formation patterns. They executed complex tactical maneuvers that should have required years of training. Old freighter crews, Draxus waved dismissively. Probably smugglers or pirates who knew some tricks. Garvin wanted to argue but held his tongue. The Dalthene Empire had conquered 17 species over 4 centuries. Every previous enemy had collapsed quickly once their main fleet was destroyed. Surely the humans would be no different. But something nagged at him. Mirith, what do we know about human military organization? The intelligence officer pulled up star charts showing human territory. 23 colonized systems spread across a modest region of space. Very little, Admiral. They've been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. Our initial probe suggested they had a unified world government and some form of defense force. Beyond that, our intelligence is limited. Limited? We're at war with them. How is it limited? Mirith's scales darkened with embarrassment. We initiated hostilities by attempting to annex their mining colony at Reeves Station. The conflict escalated faster than our intelligence could gather information. Most of what we know comes from long-range sensor sweeps and intercepted civilian communications. So we started a war without understanding our enemy. Garvin felt anger rising in his chest. We understood enough. Draxus cut in. They're a single-world species barely out of their own star system. We are the Dalthene Empire. We've crushed civilizations far older and more established. Empress Valina raised a hand for silence. Mirith, do we have any indication of human fleet strength? Estimates vary, Your Majesty. Long-range reconnaissance has detected shipyard activity around their homeworld and major colonies. We believe they possess several hundred warships, possibly more. And we have 8,000 ships of the line. Valina settled back into her throne. I see no cause for concern. High Admiral Garvin, prepare our forces for the next engagement. We will push into human space and end this war quickly. Your Majesty, I recommend caution. Perhaps we should gather more intelligence first. Caution. Draxus laughed. We just won a crushing victory. Now is the time to press our advantage, not cower and wait. The other council members murmured in agreement. Garvin recognized the political currents in the room. The empire had been expanding for centuries. Conquest was their economy, their culture, their purpose. Suggesting restraint was seen as weakness. As you command, Your Majesty. Garvin bowed his head. The council moved on to discussing the spoils from Tarsus 9. The mining facilities would be absorbed into the empire. The human colonists would be relocated to labor stations. Standard procedure. Garvin barely listened. He kept replaying the battle footage in his mind. The way those civilian ships had moved. The precision of their fire. The absolute refusal to retreat even when defeat was certain. After the council adjourned, Mirith approached him quietly. You don't believe it either, do you? She said. Believe what? That this was their full strength. That civilian volunteers fought like that without extensive military training. Garvin glanced around to ensure they were alone. What are you thinking? I'm thinking that every human transmission we intercepted mentioned buying time. I'm thinking that 12 converted freighters held off our battle group for 6 hours. I'm thinking that if these were their civilians, what are their actual soldiers like? Keep digging, Garvin said quietly. Find out everything you can about human military capabilities. I want to know what we're really facing. And if I find something concerning, then we'll pray the council listens before it's too late. Mirith nodded and left. Garvin remained in the empty chamber, staring at the holographic display. 47 ships lost, against 12 civilian volunteers who kept joking about the real Navy coming. What kind of species sent civilians to fight a delaying action? What kind of culture produced volunteer defenders who fought like professional soldiers? And most importantly, if those were just the volunteers buying time, what exactly were they buying time for? Garvin had a terrible feeling he would find out soon enough. 3 weeks had passed since Tarsus 9, and Mirith had not slept properly in any of them. Her office had become a maze of data cores, holographic projections, and translation matrices. Every piece of information she uncovered about humanity made the picture worse. Run it again, she told her assistant, a young analyst named Kren. The hologram displayed intercepted human data from the destroyed ships, financial records, personnel files, training certifications. Kren had spent days breaking the encryption. These 12 ships had crew totaling 843 individuals, Kren said. Of those, 792 had prior military service. Most served between 4 and 20 years before retiring to civilian occupations. Mirith felt her blood chill. They weren't just volunteers. They were veterans. It gets stranger. Look at this. Kren pulled up a document labeled Reserve Recall Procedures. Humans have something called reserve forces, citizens who previously served in the military but returned to civilian life. They can be recalled to active duty in times of war. How many reserves do they have? Kren's scales paled. The data suggests hundreds of millions across all their colonies. The exact number is unclear, but one file referenced maintaining reserve readiness for 70 million registered personnel in the primary call-up categories alone. 70 million? That can't be right. Run the translation again. Kren did. The number did not change. Mirith pulled up everything her department had gathered on human military structure. What she found made no sense according to any known organizational doctrine. They have 6 separate military branches, she said, reading the files with disbelief. Navy, Army, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Space Force. 6 independent organizations, each with their own command structure, training programs, and equipment. Why would any species need 6 different militaries? Kren asked. I don't know. We have the Imperial Fleet. That's all any civilization needs. This is inefficient and redundant. But even as she said it, Mirith wondered. The Dalthene had conquered 17 species. None of them had possessed anything like this level of military complexity. Most had simple defense forces, maybe a few thousand ships at most. She pulled up long-range surveillance data from human space. Their analysts had been monitoring human activity for months, trying to estimate fleet strength. Kren, what did our previous estimate put human naval strength at? Approximately 400 to 700 combat vessels, based on observed shipyard production and fleet movements. Mirith opened a new file she had decrypted that morning. It was a human military publication called Naval Force Structure Review. The document was 3 years old but detailed. According to this, humans maintain 17 numbered fleets. She pulled up the organizational charts. Each fleet consists of multiple carrier groups, battleship squadrons, destroyer flotillas, and support vessels. A single numbered fleet contains between 2,000 and 5,000 capital ships. Kren dropped the data pad he was holding. That's impossible. If they have 17 fleets of that size, their total naval strength would be between 34,000 and 85,000 warships. And that's just their space force. This document doesn't include system defense forces, colonial militias, or the other 5 military branches. The room felt colder suddenly. We have 8,000 ships in the entire Imperial fleet, Kren whispered. If these numbers are accurate, the humans outnumber us 10 to 1. Maybe more. Show this to no one yet. I need to verify it first. These numbers could be propaganda, inflated to deter enemies. But Mirith knew better. The data came from internal human documents, not public broadcasts. These were real numbers. She spent the next week cross-referencing everything. Shipyard capacity estimates, resource allocation patterns, energy consumption data from human worlds. Every analysis pointed to the same conclusion. Humanity maintained a military force large enough to conquer half the known galaxy. Finally, she requested an emergency meeting with High Admiral Garvin. She found him in his private office, reviewing defensive positions along the border. "Tell me you have good news," Garvin said. "I have accurate news. Whether it's good depends on your perspective." Mirith activated her portable projector and filled his office with data. She walked him through everything. The reserve system, the 6 military branches, the 17 numbered fleets, the organizational charts showing a military structure that dwarfed anything the Dalthene had ever encountered. Garvin listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "How confident are you in these numbers?" he asked finally. 85%. I've verified them against multiple sources. Admiral, at Tarsus 9 we fought retired civilians in converted freighters. According to these files, humans have active-duty Marines who train specifically for ship-to-ship boarding actions. They have Army units specializing in planetary assault. They have pilots who do nothing but practice space combat their entire careers. And we thought we were fighting their full strength. We weren't fighting anything close to their full strength. The force at Tarsus 9 wasn't even in their military database. Those volunteers weren't officially part of any defense plan. They just showed up and decided to fight. Garvin pulled up a star chart. Where are their fleets now? That's the terrifying part. We don't know. Our long-range sensors detected a large formation conducting exercises near their home system last week. We counted over 3,000 capital ships in formation. Their entire navy? That's what War Minister Draxus believes. He's proposing a strike while they're concentrated in one location. And what do you believe? Mirith pulled up the intercepted communication logs from that exercise. The human transmissions referred to it as Third Fleet training maneuvers. Not the fleet. Not our naval forces. Third Fleet. As in one of 17. Garvin sat down heavily. We need to present this to the Empress immediately. Will she listen? The Council is convinced humans are weak and desperate. They need to understand what we're facing. If we push forward with the current offensive plan, we could be walking into a slaughter. Mirith hoped he was right, but she had been in enough council meetings to know how politics worked. The Empire's economy depended on conquest. Admitting they had chosen the wrong target would mean admitting failure. There's one more thing, she said quietly. I found records of human military history. Admiral, they've been fighting wars for their entire recorded civilization. They have documented conflicts going back 10,000 years. They've fought each other in wars involving hundreds of millions of soldiers. That's impossible. No species is that violent. Humans are from what they classify as a Class 12 death world. High gravity, extreme weather, aggressive predators, deadly diseases. Their entire evolution was shaped by constant threat and competition. They didn't become peaceful when they reached space. They just stopped fighting each other and turned that energy toward exploration and defense. Garvin stared at the data in silence. Finally, he spoke. Prepare a full briefing for the War Council. Include everything. We need to make them understand that we're not fighting a minor colony species. We're fighting something far more dangerous. And if they don't listen, Garvin's expression hardened. Then we'll find out exactly how dangerous humans can be. And I pray to the ancestors we survive the lesson. The battle group emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the new Bristol system with 200 warships in perfect formation. Garvin had insisted on commanding this probe personally, despite the Council's objections. If Miritha's intelligence was correct, he needed to see the truth with his own eyes. Scan for enemy contacts, he ordered. His sensor officer worked quickly, detecting 43 ships in defensive orbit around New Bristol Colony. Transponder signals identify them as Colonial Defense Force vessels. 43 ships against 200. The odds felt wrong somehow. After Miritha's briefing, Garvin had expected more resistance. Communications broadcast our terms. They have 1 hour to surrender the colony or we will take it by force. The reply came within minutes. A human woman appeared on the view screen, wearing a simple uniform with a patch reading, CDF Commander Ross. Dalthene Forces, this is Commander Lisa Ross of the New Bristol Colonial Defense Force. We refuse your terms. This colony is sovereign human territory. Leave now or face the consequences. You have 43 ships. We have 200. Be reasonable. Ross smiled, but there was no humor in it. You had 47 ships at Tarsus 9. 12 civilian volunteers killed them all. We're actual trained defense personnel. Want to try your luck? The transmission ended. All ships, advance. Battle formation Delta. Disable their vessels if possible. Destroy if necessary. The Dalthene fleet moved forward. The human ships held position, not retreating, not advancing. Waiting. The first exchange of fire came at maximum range. Dalthene missiles streaked toward the human line. Point defense systems intercepted most of them, but several got through. 2 human ships took damage and fell back. Return fire came immediately. Human railgun rounds and energy beams struck with surprising accuracy. One of Garvin's destroyers lost shields and broke formation. They're targeting our shield generators, his tactical officer reported. Precision strikes. They're analyzing our ship design in real time. The battle intensified. Garvin's numerical advantage began to tell. The human colonial defense force fought well, better than they had any right to, but they were simply outmatched. One by one, their ships took critical damage. 30 minutes into the engagement, 22 human ships had been destroyed or disabled. The survivors were retreating toward the colony itself. They're beaten, Draxus said over the command channel. Press the attack. Finish them. But Garvin felt uneasy. The Colonial Defense Force had fought hard, inflicted serious damage considering their numbers, but something was off. They weren't fighting with the desperate fury of the volunteers at Tarsus 9. This felt more like a planned withdrawal. Admiral, new contacts. His sensor officer's voice went sharp with alarm. Multiple hyperspace signatures. 75 ships just entered the system. The tactical display updated. Garvin felt his blood freeze. The new arrivals were different, larger, more heavily armed. Their formation was textbook perfect, the kind of precision that required constant training and iron discipline. Transponder identification coming through. Communications reported. United Earth Space Forces, Sector 7 Patrol Group. They're hailing us. A new face appeared on the view screen. A human male older than Ross with steel gray hair and cold eyes. His uniform bore rank insignia that Miratha's intelligence had identified as Captain. Dalthene vessels, this is Captain Gerald Park of the UESF Destroyer Squadron. You are engaged in hostile action against a human colony. Stand down immediately or we will engage. This is High Admiral Garvin of the Dalthene Imperial Fleet. We outnumber you nearly 3-1. Withdraw or be destroyed. Park's expression did not change. Last warning. Stand down. All ships engage the new arrivals. Show them Dalthene's strength. What followed was not a battle. It was an education. The Sector Patrol Group moved with a coordination that made Garvin's veterans look like untrained recruits. Their ships worked in perfect synchronization, covering each other's firing lanes, rotating positions to distribute damage, executing tactical maneuvers Garvin had never seen before. Their weapons hit harder. Their shields held longer. Their crews reacted faster to every threat. Within 10 minutes, Garvin had lost 30 ships. Within 20-50 more were crippled or destroyed. His fleet was being systematically taken apart by a force less than half its size. All ships, retreat, emergency hyperspace jump. But the humans had anticipated that. They had positioned ships to block the optimal jump vectors. Dalthene vessels trying to escape ran into walls of fire. Admiral, they're not just fighting us, his tactical officer said, voice shaking. They're hurting us, controlling the battlefield like we're prey animals. It was true. The Sector Patrol Group was directing the flow of battle, deciding which Dalthene ships lived or died, allowing some to flee while destroying others with clinical precision. Finally, after 40 minutes of carnage, the surviving Dalthene vessels managed to disengage and jump to hyperspace. Garvin counted his losses as they fled. 91 ships destroyed outright. 43 damaged so severely they would need months of repair. Only 66 vessels remained combat effective. He had started with 200. The humans had started with 75 professional ships plus the survivors of the Colonial Defense Force. The command deck was silent except for damage reports and the groans of wounded crew. Get me a channel to command, Garvin said quietly. We need to report what just happened. As they limped toward friendly space, Garvin reviewed the battle recordings. He watched how the Sector Patrol Group had fought. The difference between them and the Colonial Defense Force was like comparing a professional soldier to a weekend hunter. And both were vastly superior to what the Dalthene could field. His communications officer interrupted his thoughts. Admiral, we intercepted a transmission between the human Sector Patrol Commander and their headquarters during the battle. Play it. Captain Park's voice came through clearly. New Bristol secured. Light engagement with Dalthene probe force. Enemy broke and ran. Estimate they were probing our strength and dispositions. Requesting guidance. Maintain defensive posture or pursue. The response came from someone identified as Sector Command. Maintain defensive posture. Continue patrols. First Fleet is still 3 weeks out from deployment position. The transmission ended 0.3 weeks out. First Fleet. Garvin thought about Miratha's intelligence. 17 numbered fleets. They had just been mauled by a Sector Patrol Group, which was not even a fleet-level formation. And somewhere, First Fleet was moving into position. Communications, as soon as we're in range, I need an emergency council session. All members. Immediately. Yes, Admiral. Garvin stared at the tactical display showing their retreat vector. They had come here with 200 ships to take a single colony. They were leaving with 66 functional vessels and the terrifying knowledge that they had not even faced humanity's main forces yet. The volunteers at Tarsus 9 had been buying time for the Colonial Defense Force. The Colonial Defense Force had been buying time for the Sector Patrol. And the Sector Patrol mentioned First Fleet like it was something to be worried about. Each layer of defense was stronger than the last. And they still had not seen the real navy that the original volunteers had joked about. Garvin wondered how many layers humanity had. He wondered if they would survive finding out. Most of all, he wondered why the humans had warned them at all. Captain Park could have destroyed the entire Dalthene force. Instead, he had let them retreat. That mercy felt more ominous than any threat could have been. The emergency council session was the quietest Garvin had ever attended. No celebration this time, No boasts of Dalthine's superiority. Just silence as they watched the battle recordings from New Bristol. The holographic display showed 75 human ships dismantling a force nearly 3 times their size. The council members watched their vessels die with methodical efficiency. When the footage ended, Empress Valina spoke first. "Explain what we just witnessed." Garvin stood, his body still aching from the battle. "What you saw was a sector patrol group. According to intelligence officer Miratha's analysis, this is a routine patrol force, not a primary combat fleet. They destroyed or disabled over half our battle group in 40 minutes. Impossible. Our crews are veterans. Our ships are proven designs. Your Majesty, with respect, we are facing an opponent unlike any we have encountered before." Garvin nodded to Mirath. She activated her presentation. The council chamber filled with data, charts, organizational structures, fleet compositions. "This is the United Earth Space Force's complete order of battle, compiled from captured documents and intercepted communications. I am 92% confident in its accuracy." She pulled up the first chart. Humans maintain 17 numbered fleets. First Fleet through 17th Fleet. Each fleet contains between 2,000 and 5,000 capital ships depending on its assigned theater of operations. War Minister Draxus stood abruptly. "That's absurd. No single species could maintain such a force. The data supports it. Conservative estimates place total human naval strength at 34,000 warships. Optimistic estimates exceed 85,000. The council erupted in disbelief. Garvin let them shout for a moment before speaking. "The Dalthine Empire has 8,000 ships of the line. We are outnumbered at minimum 4 to 1. Potentially 10 to 1 or worse. These must be inflated numbers," one council member argued. "Propaganda to make them seem stronger." Mirath shook her head. "These figures come from internal human documents, not public broadcasts. Additionally, I have analyzed their industrial capacity, shipyard production rates, and resource allocation. The numbers are consistent. Humanity maintains this force while it represents less than 2% of their total industrial output." Silence fell again. 2%. Valina leaned forward. "They maintain a fleet of tens of thousands of ships using only 2% of their industrial capacity? Yes, Your Majesty. Humans have an economy of scale we cannot match. Their homeworld alone has a population of 9 billion. Their 23 colony worlds add another 12 billion. They have resources and manufacturing capability that dwarfs our empire." Garvin pulled up additional data. "It gets worse. The Space Forces are only one of 6 military branches. They also maintain Army forces for ground combat, Marines for assault operations, Air Forces for atmospheric combat, Coast Guard for system security, and planetary defense forces for local protection. We haven't even seen most of these organizations. How did our intelligence miss this?" Draxus demanded. "We didn't miss it. We refused to believe it." Miratha's voice was cold. "I presented preliminary findings 3 weeks ago. They were dismissed as errors or propaganda. Every species we have conquered had small, simple defense forces. We assumed humans were the same. We were wrong." Another council member spoke up. "Even if they have this many ships, they're still a young species. Inexperienced. We have 4 centuries of military tradition. They have 10,000 years of military tradition," Mirath said flatly. "Human recorded history is filled with warfare. They have fought more wars among themselves than all other known species combined. They developed strategies and tactics through constant conflict. When they unified their world government 200 years ago, they did not abandon their military knowledge. They refined it." She pulled up historical data. "Humans have fought wars involving hundreds of millions of soldiers. They have destroyed entire cities with single weapons. They have created military doctrines for every possible type of conflict. And they practice constantly. Those exercises we detected, they conduct them continuously across all their fleets." Garvin added, "At New Bristol, we saw the difference between their colonial defense force and their sector patrol. The defense force fought well. The patrol group fought like nothing we have ever faced. And according to their own communications, they were waiting for First Fleet to arrive. First Fleet is their primary offensive formation, Mirith explained. It consists of over 4,000 capital ships, including their newest and most powerful vessels. It is currently moving toward our border. The implications settled over the council like a heavy blanket. How long until they reach our space? Valina asked. 3 weeks, based on intercepted communications. Though I suspect they could move faster if they chose to. Draxus slammed his fist on the table. Then we mobilize everything. Recall all vessels. Fortify our border worlds. If they want war, we will give them war. With what? Garvin asked. We have maybe 7,000 functional ships left after our recent engagements. First Fleet alone outnumbers us. And they have 16 more fleets behind it. We've conquered 17 species. We can conquer one more. No, Garvin said firmly. We cannot. Every species we conquered was weaker than us. Humanity is stronger. Significantly stronger. This is not a war we can win through force. Then what do you suggest? Surrender? Accept defeat without fighting? I suggest we negotiate while we still can. The council erupted in argument. Garvin let them shout while he pulled up more data. Finally, Valina called for silence. High Admiral, explain your reasoning. Your Majesty, humans have shown restraint. At Tarsus 9, they sent volunteers, not their military. At New Bristol, the Sector Patrol Group could have destroyed our entire force but allowed us to retreat. They are sending messages through their actions. What messages? That they do not want to fight this war. That they are giving us opportunities to stop before they fully commit their forces. First Fleet is 3 weeks away. That is not an immediate assault. That is a deadline. They are giving us time to reconsider. Mirith nodded. I agree with the Admiral. Humans maintain overwhelming military force, but their political structure suggests they prefer diplomacy. They have not immediately invaded our territory despite having the capability. They are showing strength while leaving room for negotiation. You want us to bow to these primitives? Draxus was incredulous. I want us to survive, Garvin said. And if we continue this war, survival is not guaranteed. Look at the data. Look at what they have and what we have. This is not about pride. This is about reality. Valina studied the holographic displays in silence. The numbers were undeniable. The video footage from New Bristol was clear. The Dalthene Empire had picked a fight with an opponent far beyond their capability to defeat. What would negotiation even look like? She asked finally. I don't know. But I know that if First Fleet arrives and we are still fighting, we won't get another chance to find out. The council debated for hours. Some argued for total mobilization and defense. Others suggested abandoning border territories and fortifying core worlds. A few agreed with Garvin that negotiation was the only path. Finally, as the session was ending, an aide burst into the chamber. Your Majesty, urgent report from Border Reconnaissance. What now? The aide activated a display showing long-range sensor data. Ships, thousands of them, arranged in perfect formation, moving steadily toward Dalthene space. Human fleet detected entering our territory. Transponder data identifies them as First Fleet United Earth Space Forces. Current count is 4,200 vessels and still updating. The council stared at the display. The human fleet was not rushing, not charging ahead in aggressive formation, just moving forward at steady, unhurried speed. Like they had all the time in the world. A transmission accompanied the sensor data. A simple message broadcast on all frequencies. United Earth Space Forces, First Fleet. Stand by for diplomatic transmission. We are prepared to discuss peaceful resolution to this conflict. You have 72 hours to respond. Garvin felt a strange mix of relief and terror. Relief that humans were offering diplomacy. Terror at the fleet they had brought to back it up. Your Majesty, he said quietly, I believe it is time we listen to what they have to say. First Fleet arrived at Karthus, for like a force of nature made manifest. Over 4,000 ships surrounded the entire system in a three-dimensional sphere so perfect it looked like a computer simulation. Every vessel held position with precision that spoke of absolute coordination. War Minister Draxus commanded the Karthus IV Defense Fleet from his flagship. 800 ships, the largest concentration of Dalthene military power outside the capital. He watched the human formation with growing rage. "They think they can intimidate us with their formations," he growled. "All ships, prepare for combat. We will show these humans what Dalthene warriors are capable of." A transmission came through on all frequencies. A human woman appeared on the view screen, her uniform bearing insignia that intelligence had identified as Admiral. "Dalthene forces, this is Admiral Patricia Howard of First Fleet. I am requesting direct communication with your leadership. This system has been designated for demonstration purposes. We do not wish to inflict unnecessary casualties. You have 48 hours to evacuate all military personnel from this system." Draxus laughed. "Demonstration? You surround us and offer mercy? We are Dalthene. We do not retreat. War Minister, please reconsider. We have no desire to destroy your forces. This is an opportunity for you to understand what you are facing without additional loss of life. I understand perfectly. You have 4,000 ships. We have 800. You think numbers will break us. You are wrong. All vessels attack Formation Omega. We charge directly at their center. Break their formation and scatter them." Admiral Howard's expression remained calm. "I am sorry you have chosen this path. First Fleet, engage defensive protocols. Minimize casualties where possible." The Dalthene fleet surged forward, 800 warships accelerating toward the center of the human sphere. Draxus had fought dozens of battles. He knew that formations, no matter how pretty, broke apart in the chaos of combat. The human response was methodical point defense systems activated with terrifying efficiency. Dalthene missiles, thousands of them, were intercepted at rates approaching 99%. The few that got through struck shields that seemed impossibly strong. Human return fire was precise. Not overwhelming, not desperate. Just exact. Each shot targeted specific systems. Shield generators. Weapon hardpoints. Engine sections. "They're not trying to destroy us," Draxus's tactical officer said with shock. "They're disabling us." It was true. Human fire was surgical. Ships were crippled, not killed. Weapons were neutralized without breaching hulls. It was a level of targeting accuracy that should not have been possible in the chaos of battle. "All ships, ramming speed. If they won't fight properly, we'll force them to." Dalthene vessels pushed their engines to maximum, attempting to close range and physically strike human ships. The humans simply moved. Their ships accelerated and maneuvered with casual ease, dodging ramming attempts while continuing their precise fire. 10 minutes into the battle, Draxus had lost 200 ships. Not destroyed, disabled, dead in space, life support functional, crews alive but helpless. This is impossible. How are they moving like that? How are they shooting with such accuracy? His sensor officer worked frantically. "Sir, they're using coordinated electronic warfare. Our targeting systems are being jammed. They're feeding us false sensor data. Every ship in their fleet is working together as a single unit. 15 minutes. 400 ships disabled. Not one human vessel lost." Draxus ordered retreat. The humans blocked every escape vector with precision fire. Not destroying, just hurting. Controlling the battlefield like they were directing livestock. 17 minutes after the battle began. It ended. 600 Dalthene ships disabled. 150 destroyed when their reactors went critical from damage. 50 ships surrounded, unable to flee or fight. Draxus's flagship was among those surrounded. "War Minister," Admiral Howard's voice came through again. "Please stand down. Further resistance is pointless. We have medical ships standing by to assist your wounded. Surrender and your crews will be treated with respect." Draxus wanted to refuse, wanted to fight to the last, but his ship was powerless. Weapons offline, engines dead, shields collapsed. "I am War Minister Draxus of the Dalthene Empire. We surrender. Human boarding ships approached. Draxus expected soldiers to storm in with weapons drawn. Instead, medics came first. They moved through his ship treating wounded Dalthene with the same care they would their own people. The Marines came after, weapons ready but not aimed. They secured the ship efficiently but without brutality. Draxus and his command staff were taken to a secure area, but they were not harmed. A human Marine officer approached him. Young, professional, polite. War Minister Draxus, you and your crew are now prisoners of war. You will be treated according to the Terran Conventions on Armed Conflict. Your wounded are receiving medical care. Your dead will be returned for proper burial rites. Do you understand? Draxus nodded numbly. Hours later, he was transported to one of the human command ships. He expected a cell. Instead, he was taken to an observation deck where Admiral Howard waited. War Minister, thank you for agreeing to speak with me. I did not agree. I am your prisoner. You could have refused. We would have respected that choice. Howard gestured to the view screen. I wanted you to see this. The screen showed Karthus IV's shipyards. Human ships moved through the facilities methodically, not destroying them, disabling them, removing key components that would take months to replace. We are removing your ability to build warships from this system, Howard explained. But we are not harming your civilian infrastructure. The workers in those yards are being evacuated safely. The colony below is untouched. Why? Draxus asked. Why show mercy? We attacked you. We invaded your territory. We killed your people. Because we remember what it is like to be on both sides of war. Humans have fought each other for thousands of years. We have learned hard lessons about the cost of total warfare. We learned that destroyed enemies stay destroyed, but reformed enemies can become allies. You think we could be allies? After this, I think you made mistakes based on incomplete information. You assumed we were weak because we are young. You assumed our offers of peace were weakness. You attacked because conquest has always worked for you before. Howard's expression was serious but not unkind. We are showing you that conquest will not work against us. Not because we want to humiliate you, because we want you to stop before more lives are lost. Draxus watched human ships work with perfect coordination. For 1,000 vessels moving like a single organism. This was First Fleet, Howard continued. One of our smaller formations. We have 16 more fleets of various sizes. We have defense forces, system militias, marine expeditionary units, and reserve forces numbering in the hundreds of millions. We maintain this capability while it represents less than 2% of our industrial capacity. Why? Why maintain such overwhelming force if you are peaceful? Because we learned another hard lesson. Peace through weakness is temporary. Peace through strength endures. We prepare for war so we can choose peace. We maintain overwhelming force so we rarely need to use it. A transmission came through. Garvin's voice. Admiral Howard, this is High Admiral Garvin of the Dalthene Imperial Command. Our Empress has agreed to negotiate. We are prepared to discuss terms. Howard smiled. Acknowledged, High Admiral. We will arrange for diplomatic envoys to meet at a neutral location. First Fleet will maintain position but will not advance further unless attacked. She turned back to Draxus. War Minister, you will be held as our guest until negotiations are complete. You will be treated well. And I hope that when this is over, you will help your people understand what we have tried to show you today. What is that? That strength without wisdom leads to destruction. That mercy is not weakness. And that we genuinely want peace, but we are fully prepared for war. The choice has always been yours. Draxus looked at the screen showing First Fleet. For 1,000 ships. One of 17 formations. A species that could field over 100,000 warships but chose restraint instead. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to face an opponent that could destroy you but chose not to. It was more terrifying than any battle he had ever fought. The Grand War Council chamber had changed. Gone were the triumphant banners celebrating 4 centuries of conquest. The holographic displays no longer showed expanding borders. Instead, They showed the reality of First Fleet surrounding their space like a noose they had placed around their own necks. Empress Valina looked older than she had mere weeks ago. Garvin stood beside her, along with Mirith and the surviving council members. They waited for the human diplomatic delegation to arrive. "Remember," Valina said quietly, "we negotiate from weakness, but we maintain dignity." The doors opened. A human man entered with a small delegation. No weapons visible. Minimal security. He wore formal civilian clothing, not a military uniform. His credentials identified him as Ambassador Richard Okafor. "Your Majesty, members of the Council, thank you for agreeing to meet. I am Ambassador Okafor, representing the United Earth Government." Valina gestured to seats. "Ambassador, let us speak plainly. You have demonstrated your military superiority. What are your terms?" Okafor sat down and activated a datapad. "Our terms are designed not to punish, but to prevent future conflict. First, immediate cessation of all military expansion beyond your current borders. Second, release of all species currently under Dalthene occupation, with reparations to be negotiated separately with each. Third, establishment of neutral zones along our shared borders with mutual defense monitoring. Fourth, a 10-year transitional period during which human observers will help restructure your economy away from conquest-based models. You are asking us to dismantle our empire," Draxus said via hologram from his captivity. "We are asking you to transform it. Your people are not our enemies. Your system of governance is. You built an economy that requires constant expansion. That model is unsustainable and threatens everyone around you. And if we refuse," Valina asked, "then we will be forced to ensure galactic security by other means. Means we would greatly prefer to avoid." Garvin spoke up. "Ambassador, your fleet demonstrated remarkable restraint at Kar thus far. You could have destroyed our forces entirely but chose not to. Why? Because destruction is easy. Building something better is harder but more valuable. We could occupy your worlds, dismantle your government, scatter your people. But that would create resentment and future conflict. We prefer reformed partners to conquered subjects." Mirith pulled up economic data. "Ambassador, your terms would collapse our economy. We depend on resources from conquered territories and labor from subject species. Without that, our industrial base will fail." Okafor nodded. "We anticipated this concern. As part of the agreement, Earth will provide economic assistance during the transition. Low-interest loans, technology transfers for sustainable resource extraction, and trade agreements to replace the wealth previously gained through conquest. It will be difficult, but survivable. Why would you help us after we attacked you?" Valina could not hide her confusion. "Because we have studied your history and ours. You became conquerors because it worked. For 400 years, you expanded and grew strong. You had no reason to change. We are giving you both a reason and a path forward. The reason is that conquest will no longer work. The path is that cooperation can work instead." The council debated quietly among themselves. Finally, Valina spoke again. "You mention Earth Space Forces as one branch of military. You have others. 6 branches total, Your Majesty. Space Forces for deep space operations. Navy for system control. Marines for assault and boarding actions. Army for ground combat. Air Force for atmospheric operations. Coast Guard for local security and rescue operations. Why so many separate organizations? It seems inefficient. Different missions require different training and equipment. Each branch specializes in its domain. They work together during combined operations but maintain distinct identities and doctrines." Garvin asked the question that had been burning in his mind since New Bristol. "Admiral Howard mentioned First Fleet is one of your smaller formations. How many ships do you actually have?" Okafor considered the question carefully. "I am authorized to share general information. We maintain 17 numbered fleets of various sizes depending on their assigned theaters. Total active warship strength is classified, but I can tell you it exceeds 80,000 capital vessels. This does not include system defense forces, reserve fleets, or ships under construction. The council sat in stunned silence despite having heard similar numbers from Mirith. That represents less than 2% of our industrial capacity, Okafor continued. We could expand significantly if needed. We choose not to because that force is already more than sufficient for our defensive needs. Defensive? Draxus's hologram flickered with disbelief. You maintain a fleet larger than anything in known space and call it defensive? Yes, because we studied our own history and learned that the most peaceful periods came when we were strong enough that no one dared attack. We call it peace through strength. We build capability we hope never to use. Valina leaned forward. Ambassador, I must ask. Tarsus 9, we fought what we thought was your full force. They were volunteers. At New Bristol, we fought what we thought was your military. They were a patrol group. Karthus 4, we saw First Fleet. Please, I need to know. Was that your full capability? Okafor met her eyes steadily. No, your majesty. First Fleet represents approximately 5% of our total deployed naval strength. We also have not mobilized our reserve forces, which number over 70 million trained personnel. We have not activated planetary defense militias or called up our industrial reserve for wartime production. Karthus 4 was a demonstration using our standard peacetime posture. Garvin felt something break inside him. The force that had crushed them so easily was 1/20th of humanity's actual military, and they hadn't even begun to mobilize. Why tell us this? Mirith asked. Why reveal your true strength? Because we want you to understand that this war is unwinnable for you. Not through luck or tactics or determination, through simple mathematics. We are trying to save lives by making reality clear. Further resistance will only result in more death. Valina sat back heavily. You are asking us to trust you, to trust that you will not simply conquer us once we are weakened. We are offering you a choice, Your Majesty. Accept our terms and rebuild as an independent partner. Or continue fighting and face eventual defeat anyway, but with far greater casualties and loss. We prefer the first option, but we are prepared for either. Hours of negotiation followed. Details were hammered out, timelines established, monitoring protocols agreed upon. Finally, as the session drew to a close, Valina signed the treaty. This will be unpopular with my people, she said. They have known only expansion and strength. Then help them learn a different kind of strength. The strength to adapt. The strength to build rather than take. It is harder than conquest, but more lasting. After the official proceedings, Garvin requested a private meeting with Admiral Howard. They met in a small observation room overlooking First Fleet. Admiral, I have one question that will not let me rest. Ask. At New Bristol, your sector patrol group could have destroyed our probe force entirely. At Karthus 4, First Fleet could have annihilated our defense fleet without losing a single ship. You chose restraint both times. Why? Howard looked out at her fleet. Because we remember being on the other side. Earth unified after a series of devastating wars. We nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. We learned that victory without wisdom leads to more war. We learned that showing strength while offering mercy creates lasting peace. But you maintain such overwhelming force. If you are peaceful, why prepare so thoroughly for war? Because hope is not a strategy. We maintain overwhelming capability so we rarely need to use it. We train constantly so we are ready instantly. We develop new weapons and tactics so we stay ahead of potential threats. And we do all this so we can spend most of our time not fighting. She turned to face him. Hi, Admiral. Do you know the most important military statistic for humanity over the past 50 years? What? The percentage of our military that sees combat. It averages less than 3%. Most of our forces spend their entire careers training, conducting exercises, and supporting humanitarian missions. That is the peace we maintain through strength. Garvin gestured at the massive fleet outside. All these ships, all these crews, trained and ready but rarely used? Exactly. We maintain the capability for war so we can choose peace. We demonstrate overwhelming force so others choose peace as well. It is expensive and requires constant vigilance, but it works. And if someone still chooses war, then we respond with the minimum force necessary to achieve our objectives, which is still usually overwhelming from our opponent's perspective. She smiled slightly. The fact that you are standing here having this conversation instead of leading a defeated fleet means our strategy worked. You chose negotiation after seeing our strength. No one else needs to die. What happens to War Minister Draxus? He will be returned once the treaty is fully implemented. He fought according to his orders and his understanding. We do not punish soldiers for following their leaders. Mirith joined them carrying a datapad. Admiral, I have completed my comprehensive analysis of human military structure. The report is 40,000 pages long and still incomplete. Howard laughed. I am not surprised. Our organizational complexity evolved over thousands of years of conflict. It is not simple or intuitive. I found something interesting. You have a military saying, if you wish for peace, prepare for war. How long have you been preparing? About 10,000 years, give or take. Mirith showed Garvin the data. They maintain galaxy-spanning military might while claiming to be peaceful. They are capable of conquering half the known galaxy but choose restraint instead. We are not peaceful, Howard corrected gently. We are just very, very good at choosing not to fight. There is a difference. She gestured to First Fleet preparing to depart. Every ship out there is crewed by volunteers who hope they never see combat. Every weapon system is maintained by personnel who pray they never fire in anger. Every tactical plan is created by strategists who consider it a success if those plans sit unused in computers forever. Garvin watched the fleet begin to withdraw. 4,000 ships moving in perfect harmony. One of 17 such formations. Less than 5% of total strength. What would have happened if we had not agreed to negotiate? He asked quietly. Additional fleets would have been deployed. Economic sanctions would have been implemented. Eventually, your empire would have collapsed under the pressure. It would have taken months or years, not weeks. But the outcome was certain. And you would have let us keep our independence even then. If you had agreed to reform, yes. We genuinely do not want subjects or territories. We want trading partners and allies. Conquest is expensive and creates resentment. Cooperation is harder initially but pays dividends for centuries. As First Fleet jumped to hyperspace, Garvin finally understood. Humanity had conquered their own worst impulses before conquering the stars. They had learned through bitter experience that the best victory is the one where no battle is fought. The Dalthene had built an empire on conquest. Humans had built something more subtle and more powerful. A civilization strong enough to enforce peace, wise enough to choose it, and patient enough to help others learn the same lessons they had paid for in blood. Thank you, Admiral, Garvin said, for showing us what we needed to see without destroying us in the process. Thank you for listening. Many do not until it is too late. Garvin returned to the council chamber where Valina was already addressing the Dalthene people via broadcast. She spoke of difficult times ahead, of change and adaptation, of learning a different way forward. Mirith stood beside him. Do you think we can really change? For 100 years of conquest, and now we must become something else. We have no choice, and perhaps that is for the best. The humans showed us two paths, reform or destruction. At least they gave us a choice. They are not what we expected. No, they are far more dangerous than we imagined. Not because of their weapons or their ships, because they learned how to stop fighting themselves and turn that energy toward something better. That is power we cannot match. Outside, the stars shone peacefully. First Fleet was gone, returned to whatever station it called home. But Garvin knew 17 fleets were out there somewhere. Along with all those reserves, all those defense forces, all that capability humanity maintained while hoping never to use it. The Dalthene Empire would survive, but it would never be the same. They had met humanity and learned the hardest lesson of all. True power is knowing when not to use it.